that series. Today, we're going to be talking around waste and recycling. A few housekeeping rules before we begin. We will be recording this session, and I think recording has just started, and we'll be sharing this on our website, We Are W11, after. If you have any questions, please post those in the chat or wait until the end of the presentation, and we'll have a Q&A session after the presentation. If I could ask that we have cameras off, so we've got a bandwidth to be aware of, and also your microphones off as well, so we don't get any disruption. But yep, I think that's it in terms of housekeeping. So yeah, as I mentioned, today is about waste and recycling. We've got Gemma Scott from the London, well, it's not the London now, it's called ReLondon, to talk to us about waste and recycling. She's going to talk for about half an hour, and then we're going to have, as I said, a Q&A session for about 10 or 15 minutes or so. So just to give you a bit more of an understanding of waste and recycling. So an average London household produces nearly a tonne or 1 car worth of waste by weight every year. Landfill waste releases CO2 and other greenhouse gases, creating pollution and causing climate change. Recycling helps to reduce the need for new materials and save resources. ReLondon is a partnership of the Mayor of London and London boroughs to improve waste and resource management and transform the city into a leading low carbon circular economy. Gemma's going to be here talking to us today. She's a chartered waste manager. She comes from Waste London, and she's going to be sort of demything us about the myths associated with waste, and telling us how you can make a difference. So I'll hand over to Gemma now. Gemma, if you want to introduce and share your screen, please.
Yep, lovely. Just let me share my screen with you. Can everybody see that? Or Sean, at least, can you see that?
Yep, see that, that's fine.
Lovely, I'm just trying.
Should we keep on mute?
Yeah, if you don't mind, Robert,
Okay.
and I'll obviously take the camera off as well, that'd be great. Thank you. Cheers.
Lovely. Well, thank you ever so much to start with for welcoming me to come and speak to you about waste and recycling. And thanks for the introduction, Sean, as well. So like Sean said, today, I just want to take you through some kind of basics, really, the waste basics, a little bit about waste in London, and then Lancaster West as well. Talk you through some waste myths, maybe bust some of those for you, and then just really at a personal level, as well as Lancaster Waste redevelopment, really is what you can do to make a difference. So hopefully you will find it engaging. So just to start with, just talk about kind of waste basics. So right down to what is waste. Now, for an individual, so like yourselves, you usually see waste as something that you don't want anymore, or that you have no need for, or no longer serves a purpose. But just because an item isn't useful to us or to you, that doesn't mean it's completely useless. As such, waste should be treated as a resource that someone else can get value from. So that's what we're talking about today. But when I say get value from, what do I mean? How do you actually get any value out of waste that you throw away at home or at work? Well, this can be done either by keeping the item in its current form or by returning it to its raw materials and then making it into something else. Now, I'm sure lots of you will be aware of the waste hierarchy, and I'm just going to talk you through it very, very briefly. But the waste hierarchy is actually an EU directive, and it explains in really simple terms how waste should be managed to maximise its value. So I'm sure you'll be aware that the top of that hierarchy is reduce. So we should all be trying in our daily lives to reduce the amount of waste that we produce. So this could be swapping out everyday products that we use. So this is an example here of a lady washing her hair with a shampoo bar rather than using bottled shampoo. The next part of the hierarchy is reuse. And obviously, where possible, we should reuse the things that we do before we buy and dispose of them. So, for example, if you've got a food caddy at home, you can actually line that with old newspaper instead of buying liners for it. That's a good example of reuse. And then also when it comes to, for example, bottles of water, if you're going for a run or whatever, rather than buying a bottle of water from the shop every time, get a really good sturdy water bottle that you can keep refilling as you go along. Then the next thing, obviously, that you'll all be aware of, and I'm sure hopefully all of you do at home and in the office once we're all back in, is to make sure that we all recycle. And we should recycle absolutely everything that we can to get as much of the raw materials out of those products. A lot of people, particularly in flats, and obviously we're talking about talking about flatter properties here, only have one main bin at home. Meaning that most of it, if not all of it, can very often go into the general waste bin rather than be recycled. So really, really critical that that everybody at home has at least a second bin. So, one bin for general rubbish and then a second bin for their recycling to make sure that they're actually separating it in their homes. Next step on the hierarchy is recovery. And it's one that's totally outside of most average Londoners' control anyway. And this is what happens to your general waste once it's collected, either from your communal bins in the scenario of an estate like Lancaster West, or from your homes. Waste that is sent for recovery is incinerated, or energy from waste, and I'll come on to talk about that because that's what happens to your general waste in West London. And this process produces electricity and heat. And obviously the very last part of the waste hierarchy, which is where we don't really want to be, but obviously there's always going to be some waste left over, and that's landfill. Clearly it's the worst option due to issues around methane and carbon dioxide that's produced when waste breaks down, but it is still an option there. Very, very little waste from London. It's kind of, I think it's 3% in the last year actually ends up in landfill, so it's very, very small. It's actually the smallest amount that ends up in landfill of any other region in the country. So a lot of our waste that can't be recycled tends to go to recovery. Then I just wanted to speak to you really about the circular economy. So the top steps of the waste hierarchy, so kind of that kind of reduction and reuse leads us into what we call the circular economy. So the aim of the circular economy is to keep materials and products in use for as long as you possibly can, and keeping that at the best possible quality as well. This is done by reusing items ourselves, selling items on to others in their current state, or sharing and hiring items instead of buying items for ourselves. But how does this work in practice? So some examples of companies that actually do this. So IKEA, as an example, is looking at renting furniture as well as selling it, which is an interesting idea. Vega there, a company that I'm not sure many of you will have heard of, but they have a subscription service for baby clothes and maternity wear. So rather than going and buying it yourselves, they actually you can actually kind of lease it from them almost. And then Isla Bikes there, that's a subscription service for children's bikes as well. So there's just some examples of organisations operating in the capital that are kind of using the circular economy. So reducing, recycling and reusing, why do we need to bother thinking about it? Why do we need to do it? Well, clearly waste is a really growing problem for the environment. We're using way more natural resources than are being replaced. And obviously recycling saves energy and reduces greenhouse gas emissions as well. Be staggered to know that London gets through 7.7 billion plastic bottles every year. You almost can't comprehend just how many that is. Some of you may or may not know, but aluminium and glass is infinitely recyclable, so it can be recycled again and again and again, and it doesn't lose any of its properties. And then just a little fact, really. So recycling one drinks can save enough energy to power a TV for up to 4 hours, which is significant. So moving on to waste in London and Kensington and Chelsea and Lancaster West. So how much waste do we produce and what is it made up of? So London-wide, every year, London boroughs are collecting the equivalent of about 1,500 50-metre swimming pools of waste, which is obviously an incredible amount. And as Sean mentioned at the beginning, the average household in London produces around 1 tonne of waste every year. So, the equivalent of a weight of a small family car. The diagram you can see there on the right-hand side just shows you what your waste bin is made up of, basically. So, significant proportion of the overall waste is food, and actually that's slightly higher in flats. It's more like 30%, just because you don't have an awful lot of green garden waste. And you'll probably be staggered to hear actually that 60% of that food waste, so 60% of that 26% of the food waste is actually avoidable. It's things that we could have actually either not bought so much of, or we could have been a little bit more careful in terms of how we prepare our food, how we store it, those kind of things. I just wanted to touch on some of the legislative drivers within the waste industry. So on the left there, you've got the London Environment Strategy and the Mayor Sadiq Khan. That was actually published in 2018, but is still current. And that sets targets across London for how much waste should be recycled. So, for example, they've set a target of 50% of household waste to be recycled by 2030. And then there are other targets around commercial waste as well. They want every curbside property to be receiving a food waste collection service by 2020. So that was obviously last year. And there's other targets associated with cutting food waste and packaging. And also you might be interested to know that every single London borough, including Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, have to produce a reduction and recycling plan, which sets out how it's going to meet its own targets to contribute to the Mayor's London-wide targets, and they're available online, and will have been signed off by Kensington and Chelsea councillors as well. The second document you can see there is the national strategy. So that's the England Waste and Resources Strategy. That has there's 4 consultations that are actually ongoing at the moment. It's probably fair to say that it's the biggest shake-up in waste, certainly in my lifetime. So it includes things like ensuring that there's a consistency of recycling service that's provided to everybody. So whereas at the moment, some boroughs will offer slightly different materials for collection than another. One of the consultations as part of this strategy is all around consistency of material offering. So making sure that every borough offers mixed recycling. Every borough offers a separate weekly food waste collection service, and that's from 2023, and also glass recycling. The second main consultation that's ongoing at the moment is the introduction of a deposit return scheme. So some of you may seen those types of schemes on the continent. In fact, they were over here many years ago. But we're actually looking at a nationwide deposit return scheme at the moment, and there's consultation out on that. The third one there is reform of packaging regulations. So making the actual businesses that produce packaging waste, making them responsible for the full net costs of managing the packaging waste that comes out of the system. So again, that's really transformative. And then the fourth one there is a plastic packaging tax. And that proposes that from April next year, those businesses producing, using or importing plastic packaging that contains less than 30% recycled plastic will have an additional tax put upon it. So you can see there's some quite wide-reaching changes that are potentially coming down the line and are all being consulted on and discussed at the moment. Next, I wanted to take you onto household recycling rates in the capital. Now you can see that for England, household recycling rates were just shy of 44%. So the latest figures are for 1920. You can see London's about 10% below that, just over 33%. The Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea is just under that, so 28, just over 28%. And I thought it'd be useful to you to see kind of how that compares with neighbouring authorities. So you've got Hammersmith and Fulham. Don't know why I've got RB there, but apologies for that. Which is 25. You've got Westminster, so WCC, which is 20, and then you've got Wandsworth at nearly 24. So compares quite well with immediate neighbouring boroughs. But I think if you look at the actual map there of London, the key is on the top right. The different colours mean different recycling rates across the city. So you'll notice that all of the best performing boroughs are in outer London. And the highest recycling rate, which actually is Bexley, down there on the right hand side, that is they are achieving a 54% recycling rate. And I'll come on to the reasons for why the outer London boroughs tend to do much better in terms of recycling rates than the inner London boroughs on the next slide. Then we've got the middle range boroughs, so the orange and yellow ones. Those recycling rates range from between 25 and 41. And then finally, we've got the ones in red, which are kind of the lower performing boroughs. So the lowest performing borough in London, for example, is Newham, and that's got a recycling rate of just over 20%. One of the things that's really, really interesting to know, though, I think, and to note, is that there's a huge gap in recycling performance between the boroughs. So you've got the highest Bexley at 54 and the lowest Newham at 20%. So that's a kind of 34% gap. And I'll come on now, actually, as to why there's such wide variations in the recycling rates across the city. Excuse me. I guess firstly, it's worth saying that the city is very diverse, as you all know. People living here come from hundreds of different cultures, and a lot of those whose first language isn't English. It's obviously impossible for councils to communicate about recycling in every language that's present in those boroughs. And so it can be difficult for some residents to understand what should and shouldn't be recycled. And that can often be reflected in recycling rates, local recycling rates especially. Secondly, waste is measured, so the recycling rates I just gave you are all measured by weight, and obviously garden waste, is one of the heaviest waste types that residents produce. Now, obviously, if you live, huge parts of London are flats. Nearly 50% of London is purpose-built flats, who don't have gardens or have very, very small gardens. So obviously, the amount of green waste that's available to collect is very limited, and so this automatically reduces our recycling performance. So especially when you see those inner and outers, those changes in recycling rate, you can kind of start to understand. And then linked to that, showing that difference between inner and outer. Now, obviously, all of the inner London boroughs have an awful lot more flatted properties than the outer London boroughs. So, for example, in some boroughs such as Newham, which has the lowest recycling rate in the city, 80% of their properties are flats. Flats have notoriously low recycling rates. There's a whole multitude of reasons for those. For that, such as accessibility, location of bins. For example, if a resident has to, walk down 8 flights of stairs and then 100 yards, for example, to the nearest recycling bin. There's issues with poor quality of service, recycling services sometimes to estates. So kind of poor signage, not enough recycling bins, not collected frequently enough. And then other issues around kind of lack of kitchen space, which makes separation of waste more tricky. So like I said earlier, everybody's kind of main bin is their general waste bin. But when you've got a really small, tiny kitchen, and I used to live in one when I lived in Hackney, trying to find space for an additional container to separate your waste into dry recycling, let alone food as well, can often be quite tricky. So that is why a lot of the higher performing boroughs are actually outside London. So just wanted to kind of just take you through what happens once your waste is collected. So obviously residents put their waste into the communal recycling bins. And if you obviously live in a house, then you'll put them out and you put all the waste into your bins. The recycling lorry will come and collect it, and then off it will go to either be recycled or for energy from waste. And it's probably worth you all knowing that local authorities are actually legally obliged to provide a waste collection service to all households within their borough, and you'll be aware that you pay for that within the council tax that everybody pays. So bringing you on to the Lancaster West recycling and waste. So hopefully you recognise some of these pictures. On the left-hand side, you've got general rubbish. So lots of residents will probably put the general rubbish in bins in their homes and bring it down and put it into the external communal bins. And then on the recycling side, there are recycling bins dotted across the estate. And then I'm aware that obviously there's a food waste trial ongoing on the estate. Residents will be provided with caddies, and then there will be communal food waste bins. They will look similar to this. The signage on the front's not exactly the same, but they will look very similar to this. The ones that you're using at the moment. What items can be recycled? So this is just in the kind of dry recycling, so not including food here. So cardboard and paper. You've got cans. Glass, bottles and jars. Tetra Pak containers, like juice and milk, cans, so steel and aluminium cans, things like baked beans, dog food, cat food, that kind of stuff, Coca-Cola, and then you've got pots, tubs and trays and plastic bottles, and there's a whole range of plastic bottles, and people often forget that it's not just plastic bottles that people use in their kitchens, it is also plastic bottles from cleaning products, from things that you're using in a bathroom like shampoo as well. And then I just wanted to kind of highlight as well that large amounts of the wrong items or what is known as contamination frequently find their way into especially communal recycling bins, so the communal recycling bins on the estates. And then for some of those recycling bins, contamination can often be as high as 50%. And often some of that material will have to kind of go straight for energy recovery because it is so heavily contaminated with the wrong items. So it takes many forms, contamination, but I think these are the key ones that we find out and about. So food waste, for example, not necessarily put in there deliberately as kind of food waste, but either kind of from recyclable items that haven't been washed properly. But we also do just find food waste in there as well. Don't recycle foil and aerosols in the recycling bins that you find on the estate, or clothing. Obviously, there's lots of charity shop options, not necessarily at the moment, but hopefully in the not too distant future when they're open. But there are certainly lots of bring sites as well for clothes, and obviously swapping as well. Reusing items within your community is a really good way of getting those items reused. Plastic bags and film can't be recycled. Nappies, dare I say it, I'm sure lots of you are thinking, well, of course nappies can't go in the recycling bin. You'll be amazed about the amount that we actually get. Clearly they can't be recycled, and we don't want them in there. And then the other thing is garden waste as well. That we often see, even if it's flowers that people have thrown out, that kind of thing. We don't want those either. So I just wanted to talk you through exactly what happens to your waste on the estate. So when it comes to general waste, I'm sure lots of you will put it into a black bag or some kind of sack that you've purchased. That then goes to Smugglers Way on the south side of the Thames in Wandsworth, where it is bulked up and it's put onto barges. So you can see the barge there in the middle. And that's taken to Belvedere, to the energy from waste facility there, generating obviously electricity and heat to be used in the local network. So that's what happens to the general waste. When it comes to the recycling, again, that's taken to Smugglers Way and bulked up. And then I'm just going to share a really, really short video with you. And it goes to a materials recycling facility, again, in Smugglers Way on the south side of the river in Wandsworth. It's just a short video just showing you what happens once it reaches that plant.
Here at the Materials Recycling Facility, unsorted recycling arrives and is loaded onto conveyors where non-recyclables are removed. It is then put on a vibrating machine that separates the cardboard and paper. Different types of paper are sorted by hand and then baled. The rest of the recycling continues along another conveyor where steel and tin cans are removed using magnets. Optical scanners are used to identify plastic bottles, pots and tubs, which can then be separated. An eddy current is used to separate aluminium cans. Finally, the glass that remains drops off the end into a large container. Now sorted, the separated materials are sent to be recycled. Not all councils collect the same recyclable items, so check the post.
I hope that was just useful, just to kind of understand how a materials recycling facility works. They do in non-COVID times. They actually do. You can actually visit that site. I really recommend it actually, because there's nothing like kind of understanding the process that your waste goes through once it arrives there. And like it said, all the materials are separated into their individual parts, and then off they go to the end markets to be reprocessed. Now, you're not going to be able to necessarily take all this in, but I'm sure Sean will share the slides afterwards. But this just talks you through where in the UK and in Europe the kind of key recyclable materials go. So, for example, you've got plastic bottles going to kind of Lincolnshire and Dagenham to be then probably produced into new plastic bottles again. Just wanted to take you a little bit, just to kind of show you what things end up as, really, more than anything. So once those bales have been, from the MRF, have been shipped to recycling plants, they'll be processed either back into the raw material that they were before, or into a form where something new can be created from them. So, for example, plastic bottles there, the Avian bottle that you've got there, that can become clothing. So polyester, nylon, and acrylic are all forms of plastic, and they make up 60% of our clothes worldwide. You may be interested to know. Office paper can be recycled into other papers, such as newspapers. Aluminium there you've got, as I said before, doesn't lose its quality and can be recycled again and again into things, even such as aeroplanes, actually. And there you've got, the last one there, you've got good quality cardboard. Will degrade with the recycling process over time. That's not something that's infinitely recyclable because the fibres shorten. So that will be turned into kind of lower grade items such as egg boxes, as you can see there. So hopefully that's been useful to kind of understand what happens to the waste in Kensington, Chelsea, and from the Lancaster West estate as well. Just wanted to kind of talk you through some kind of waste myths that I think you might find interesting. So the first myth is all plastic is bad. And kind of all I hear from everybody at the moment is how bad plastic is, and yeah, I get it. It's not. There are lots of reasons why it's not great for the environment, but some plastic is absolutely necessary, because otherwise you get everyday food items, for example, that would degrade much more quickly if it wasn't in plastic, for example. And also having it in plastic doesn't just make it easy to transport, but it also keeps it fresher for longer, like I was saying. And obviously that's therefore reducing food waste significantly as well. It has a great use, for example, in blister packs. So you can see they're a paracetamol pack. They allow you to access the medicine in an easy way, allowing for the correct dosage, whilst it being completely hygienic as well. And then there's household products such as bleach and other cleaners, where plastics is the safest way to contain the products that are harmful from within them. So I think just, obviously, don't use plastic where you don't need to, or don't buy plastic where you don't need to, but just be really mindful that some plastic is necessary. The next myth I wanted to share with you was compostable and biodegradable is better than plastic. Now, at first glance, you see the word compostable or biodegradable. I'm sure you all think, great, environmentally friendly, that's fine to buy. Well, I think, unfortunately, most of those products that you buy, especially the kind of coffee cups that you're given, won't compost in your home, in your compost bin at home. They will only break down in real industrial conditions because they need to reach a high enough temperature. So this is an example of a compost bin at home where it's not going anywhere, basically, because it needs to be in those industrial conditions. So if you put it into your recycling bin, it can't be processed at the MRF, obviously, if it's biodegradable or compostable. So please don't put those kind of items in your general recycling bin, because if it ends up at the MRF, it will be sent to incineration or landfill anyway. So yeah, it depends what you think you're going to be able to do with that item once you've actually purchased it. The next myth is that kind of all good quality paper can be recycled. And I will just say this is kind of a good test, really, only if it scrunches in your hand and doesn't kind of open up again, and doesn't have glitter on it as well. So that scrunch test is a really good one, actually. And obviously, I remember at Christmas time that a lot of greetings cards have got glitter on, that reprocessors do not like. It's not good for the reprocessing industry. And then I'm sure lots of you have seen these arrows on various things. Lots of people think if a pack's got this kind of arrow on it, then it can be recycled. That's not the case. These are some kind of common different labelling that you'll see out and about or on items that you might buy. So you may assume that because it's widely recycled, for example, this logo here, that it can go into any recycling bin. This just means, so this widely recycled icon just means that it's collected by 75% or more of councils in the UK. But you may live in the 25% of councils that don't collect it. So it's always worth checking on that one. This one is called the green dot. And it has absolute no relevance to the recyclability of the packaging it has been put on at all. It's used quite a lot in Europe, so you might have seen it there on holiday or from stuff that's been produced over there. And it simply signifies that the producer has made a financial contribution towards the recovery and recycling of packaging as a whole across Europe. So you can ignore that one when it comes to kind of labelling of recycling. And then we call this the Mobius loop. I don't know where Mobius comes from, but anyway, Mobius loop. This shows that the item is capable of being recycled, but it does not indicate the acceptability of the item within the recycling collections that might operate in your local area. So if there is just one council or one waste collection company in England that can recycle this item, they can put this item on it, which seems slightly perverse to me, but yeah, so just be really careful, because a lot of the labelling isn't always as clear as maybe it could be. And then the last myth here is that waste is sorted at the MRF, so I don't need to bother sorting it at home. I showed you obviously the MRF video before. The fact if it isn't sorted beforehand, then there is a chance that nothing will be recycled. So if you put non-recyclables in your recycling bin, so all the things I was saying that were kind of classed as contamination, and that's noticed by the collection crew or the quality control crew at the MRF, depending on the waste type, so the contaminated waste type. So we get all sorts. We get, healthcare waste, we get needles, that kind of thing in the recycling. When it comes to kind of serious contamination like that, very often either part of that bin truck or the entire load of that truck may need to be sent straight to energy recovery to be processed. So I would just really, be really careful what you put in. And if in doubt, leave it out is basically what we're saying, or go and check if you can. So just kind of lastly, just wanted to talk about how you at home and in your jobs as well, with what you're doing in terms of the redevelopment of Lancaster West, can make a difference. So personally, there's lots of things that you can do to reduce the amount of waste that you produce. I'm just going to kind of go through lots of these ideas now, just quickly. So carry a shopping bag with you, reusable shopping bag with you. There's a huge choice of bags, on Amazon or in local shops when they're open as well. Really thin, really lightweight material that you can fold into your handbag or your rucksack. And obviously, as well as being good for the environment, it also saves you, 5 or 10p every time you go shopping. So this might sound strange, but it's really important actually. So carry reusables with you as much as you possibly can. So that's right from kind of water bottles to cutlery, So very often, if you go, when we were all normal times, you might pop into M&S for some lunch, and then you'd get a kind of a wooden fork or a plastic fork that you then have to throw away because there's no, not necessarily recycling availability for that. So, carry some reusable cutlery with you when you know you're going to be using it. And like I said, coffee cups as well is a really good one. And often you get money off of your coffee if you're providing them with a reusable cup. It's a reusable cup there, and there's some reusable straws as well that you can buy. I've actually got some at home. They come with the pack I've got come with a little straw cleaner as well, so you can actually properly clean them when you're washing them. Buy fruit and veg from local markets. There's lots of local markets in West London, and then you can make your shopping plastic free. Very often they will either you can put the stuff directly loose into your bag, or they very often have paper bags that you can use. If you're bringing breakfast or lunch into the office from home, once we're all back to normal again, you can use these nice little sandwich wraps that you can see there on the bottom left hand side, or some Tupperware instead of cling film. Like the photo there is showing you is a really, really good one, rather than using foil or cling film. Batch cook up as much ingredients as you can whilst they're fresh. And then you can freeze those additional portions, have them for lunch the following week. You'll be amazed just how much food can be frozen. Cooked rice can be frozen. We do a lot of work around encouraging people to freeze things like rice, because it's very often the stuff that you kind of overcook when you're cooking for a family or yourself. And other things like bread. Huge amounts of bread are thrown out across the capital. Stick it in the freezer and you can just pop it out and either defrost it or put it in the toaster when you need it. Buy secondhand clothes. So whether that's at a charity shop or eBay or elsewhere that you know of, you can find some really good high-end bargains actually at a lot of these places. Make simple repairs to your clothing. I'm not great at sewing, but I can sew a button on, and you can really help prolong the life of items by just doing some simple repairs yourself. And so there's a kind of a whole heap of things you can do before you have to actually throw it away. And then the last thing I kind of wanted to just touch on really was what you could do within the Lancaster West development. So the first photo there you've got is top left is improving dry recycling services for residents. So it's a project that we have run over the last couple of years. We have proven that basically you can do a lot to increase performance in recycling on estates if you provide a really good, clear, clean, nice service for residents to use and giving them the right information. So that's that top left photo there is an example of what bins can look like when they're well looked after and they're cleaned regularly. The one underneath that is obviously food waste. So obviously really good that you've got food waste there at the moment. I believe there are plans to roll it out across the development as well. So that's great. The challenge is getting residents to use it as much as we possibly can. Top right there is multi-bin kitchen units. So I'm aware that quite a lot of the blocks will have new kitchens installed within them. One of the really simple things that you can do whilst you're doing that, while you're doing the refurbs of the kitchens, is actually to install multi-bin kitchen units. Then you've instantly got a bin that's split into 3 compartments that people can use for food, general recycling and their general rubbish, without having to have a big freestanding bin and a caddy on the side. It can all just really neatly go away somewhere. And then the last thing is just kind of careful management of any waste that's produced as a result of the redevelopment. So kind of construction and demolition waste, all the waste that's coming out of replacing these kitchens, etc. Making sure you think about how that can best be reused potentially as well, but certainly recycled. And that is me. Sorry, there was an awful lot to kind of talk about there. Any questions? Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Gemma. That was an excellent presentation. I certainly learned a lot. I didn't realise the way in which London is much more struggles to kind of recycle more in a London place than out of London places. It's quite visually apparent from that kind of map that you showed. Let's just have a look at the chat and see if there's any questions in there. Robert, every recycling bin I go to seems to have plastic bags holding the waste, or plastic bags contamination.
The materials recycling facilities don't tend to want them, because basically they get kind of tied up in all of their machinery, which means that they have to stop the machinery, untangle the bags out. So
yeah, I'm Robert. Hi, thank you. It was very fascinating. I'm the gardener here.
Oh, lovely.
I'll have to try stay focused because I have too many questions in my head. Yeah, but the plastic bag thing, I see so many people do it. They go along with their plastic bag. They throw their newspapers and whatever with the plastic bag because they're lazy. I mean, there's a laziness. I'd love you to come to Baseline because the recycling here is terrible. And I'll admit, I have no idea which the bins here are very unclear, and 90% of the people here don't recycle, and that's a fact. I've had jumping from. In the early 90s, my father lived in Holland for a long time, and when I went there, they're amazing. They're so far ahead of the game. I mean, I didn't even know about recycling, but they are so on it in Holland. There's 2 compost bins. They're called hot bins on the estate. It's just almost a full-time job for me because people will go along. Yesterday, I went in, somebody threw an entire loaf of bread. Another, we'll throw an entire pineapple, a whole load of strawberries. Both of them end up very anaerobic, very acidic. It's really hard to monitor unless I stand there all day long. It's so to create good compost. I've cut in the tea garden a little bit better because I'm on it and I'm always there. But moorland, every morning I'm in despair. People love the idea of doing it and that they do it, but they just don't think what to put in. And it's kind of almost like it's a nice idea, but the result is terrible. Yeah. But I'd love to improve this area. I almost feel there should be two bins. Or I thought, Sean, that they were going to do something where they're going to take stuff away.
I'm not quite sure.
James has mentioned this.
Yeah, potentially. Gemma, what's the kind of advice you would give us in terms of improving collection of waste and sort of splitting out that? Seems as though information is pretty key to what you do.
Yeah, I mean, information is really key, but different people consume information in different ways. That's the trickiness of it. So, just going around and giving everyone a leaflet, you'll probably find half of them in the general waste bin rather than the recycling bin within an hour of you doing it. So it's a tricky one. I mean, have you got on the actual hot bin itself, Robert? Have you got any kind of signage that says?
Oh, we have signage, and you can do all the education you want, but it's not. Honestly, I've done it for a while. It's really.
Yeah, I
cannot tell you how hard it is because mainly because they become too anaerobic. My very first one, I've had loads of I was drinking too much gin, so suddenly I realised it's just full of lemons, and it's a disaster. So it's very hard to get right. I let other people talk. My last thing is to do fun things. Now, one of our residents, Steve Bounds, is part of a thing called Eco Bricks. Have you heard of them?
I haven't. Eco
Bricks. Well, basically, I'm trying to hold it up. I don't know why. I'm on the beach somewhere. Right. So that is solid. That's as solid like a brick.
Yeah.
Of plastic, and he wants to do an event here where we bring your plastic bottles. He's made a table out of it. So there you go. Plastics. The great thing about plastic is it's there forever, and so he's made a really nice chair and a table. So having little events where residents can bring your plastic bottle, let's make a table.
Yeah.
The kids would like it, and the kids go, I want to make a table. So if Google it, they're called Eco Bricks.
Yeah, no, I will. I've written it down, definitely.
Yeah. So I think doing things like that where they have fun with it in real time would encourage people, but educating people it's really hard.
One of the things we've done on another, sorry, Sean, one of the things we've done on another estate is in Lambeth, actually, is we've got the local school kids to actually design the kind of signage for bins. And that's that. I mean, it looks great, but it engages the young people.
Yeah.
And then the community has more of an ownership over the facilities that are there as well.
Sounds good. Sounds like
would it be last thing? I'm going to say a last thing. Would it be an idea to have like an event, a recycling event, where you'd literally have at the a day where someone like me would and you'd try to make it fun and say when they come along and go, but try and make it entertaining and give them gifts like what you mentioned. Well, here's your, when you go to the shop, take this with you.
Why not? Why not? Post-COVID, why not?
Yeah, post-COVID, so an event at the bins, the
bin event.
Yeah, but one other thing I wanted to ask.
Thank you very much, by the way. I'll let other people talk.
Sorry, one other thing, Jim, I wanted to ask is how much of the waste and recycling is it possible for us to actually do? Because if organisations and companies are producing stuff which is difficult for us to recycle, how much control do we really have over this issue?
I mean, I think you have much more of a control than you think. I think individuals have more of a control than we believe we do. I think it's really easy to say, well, the businesses that produce the packaging, it's their problem. We are the consumers. We are the people that are buying the stuff that they are putting on the market. And that kind of goes back to the kind of whole reduction and, all the kind of reduction tips that I was talking about. Vote with your feet, vote with your purse. One person can't change the world, but lots and lots of people can.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to remember that sometimes. It's really easy to lose sight of that, of the fact of the impact that individuals can have collectively.
Yeah, definitely. Is there any more questions for Gemma? There was one more from Robert, actually, which I've just missed. It's just similar to what I've just said, actually. It was about should we be mindful and actually consume less, which kind of ties into what you were just saying there, prevention rather than the cure, basically. But I think you're right. Any more questions or things to raise for Gemma? Otherwise, I will.
So Gemma, can I ask?
Yeah.
So I know, obviously, cleaning things that go in the recycling from like food waste, getting rid of the food waste and recycling is important. Why is that? If the recycling gets sorted at the plant, is it difficult to sort the food waste out of that's contaminating plastic packaging and things like that?
Yeah, it's pretty much impossible, because if you've got, I don't know, a mustard jar or a dog food can or something that has not been washed out properly, that goes into the same bin as paper and cardboard that will literally just suck that up, right, in effect. So once you mix it all together, you end up with just this lovely food soup, for want of a better description, across lots of material that you need to have clean. And then that either can't be recycled or it's just really tricky, because it's kind of penetrated the actual kind of fibre of the product.
There was a tenuous link. There was an article in the Standard yesterday where it's all about pollution and how we don't open our windows so the pollutants stay in, and when we clean our windows we use chemicals. Is there a big difference between me going and buying Fairy Liquid and Ecover? What I buy, in other words, they're both plastic bottles, but it does make a difference, doesn't it, that we mindfully look at what we're buying. I know, but the trouble is, it's you got a little bit of money and you think, well, Poundland's got Fairy Liquid at £1 and Ecover's £4, and that's so is that very important for us to consider? So what we buy.
Absolutely. We all have control over what we buy, and making the most environmentally informed decisions that you can is really important. I get that some people aren't going to want to spend £4 on or whatever an eco bottle of washing up liquid is. Although there are lots of other benefits around that product. You can get refillables in certain shops, so you're only buying one plastic bottle and you can get it refilled. But Yeah, I mean, I'm not sitting here kind of preaching at people that this is what you must do kind of thing. It has to fit into people's lives. I'm a realist as well.
Yeah. Brilliant. Any more questions whilst we have Gemma at all? We're 52 minutes past. No. Gemma, that's been absolutely brilliant. Really thank you for your time today. Appreciate everyone else from joining the call as well. Next month we'll be talking about our own sustainability strategy. Got our own very Hannah Smith is going to join us and do a presentation. We'll send out the information close to the time. But thanks very much, Gemma, today, and thanks all for attending. And see you next time. Cheers.
No problem. Thanks for inviting me.
Bye. See you later.
Thank you.